I thought dominating the streets was a really interesting phrase he chose to use, Tom, and it was a phrase he also used in a phone call earlier to governors where he said that they had to go out and dominate or they'd look like a bunch of jerks. And his Defence Secretary, Mark Esper, said to the governors, look, you've got 70,000 National Guard troops activated in 29 states, but most of the states using them have fewer than 200 deployed. So he too said we need to dominate the battle space. So interesting, you're quite right to point out there were a couple of different messages there in Donald Trump's address to the nation. One of them was, I am standing with the peaceful protesters, he actually said, but on the other hand, he says we need to absolutely dominate. And, you know, he told the governors, you've got to arrest people, you have to try people, you have to put them in jail for 10 years, then you'll never see this stuff again, and you have to let them know that. Well, there's a certain inevitability, of course, to what's about to happen here, I think, and I don't think to some extent, Tom, it would matter who was president, it'd be happening, and that is the involvement of the military, because police do look outnumbered. But then again, we saw in those pictures before what a dreadful situation with some more kind of police brutality adding to the tensions. So what a mess. I mean, you know, it does look like eventually, essentially you'll see the president using the Insurrection Act to overrule the governors if this goes on, which you anticipate it might, even if they call in the National Guard, call in the military, and will effectively have several cities in the US under martial law. That's probably going to be how this resolved. Now, how this resonates with middle-class Americans who are so key to whether Trump or Biden wins the election, well, it might actually resonate well, because what they want more than anything is safety of themselves and safety of their family. I saw what Barack Obama said there, what the tweet that you pulled up, and his support for the protest, and that's all well and good. You even had Trump saying, I support the peaceful protesters, I stand with them. But those looting scenes, I mean, no one can support that, no one can condone that, and it's just, you can't have that sort of lawlessness on your streets. You've got to do pull whatever law and order levers that you've got in order to quell that.
You do. I mean, you cannot obviously allow this to go on unfettered. The question is, you know, right now, language matters. The lines you can pick out, I mean, from any Donald Trump address, there's usually something for everyone. These are areas we're getting in. I can see it's a target of some sort there. I don't actually know where these is. Look, it's pretty chaotic, the sources we're getting in. We're going to show you it's in the US, and these are people protesting. But, Andrew Clennell, you know, the words still do matter from Donald Trump. And while you understand why you'd have to pull various levers to just get control back of the country, that's where we're at right now, it still matters how you say it, and also, you know, who you blame. I mean, we're unsure exactly partly the role Antifa, the anti-fascist movement, is playing in all of this, but a lot of experts are saying, you know, they're concerned about both the extreme left and the extreme right. You've got to try to bring the nation together even as you crack down on the dissenters.
Yes, well, I do think it was interesting, though, that he talked about standing with the peaceful protesters. Would have been a lot more inflammatory without that, but nevertheless, going to be a lot of Americans there angry at Donald Trump, and he made some governors angry in that phone call prior to his address. I mean, he told the Democratic governor, Janet Mills of Maine, that it seemed the governor was trying to talk him out of visiting Maine, and now she probably talked me into it. And he was just he was on fire really in this phone call. I mean, he said they were going to look like fools. You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. And then he congratulated the governor, I think, of Minnesota, Tim Walz, for his use of National Guard over the past couple of nights. Someone on the call then made a comment about the Minnesota response looking like an occupying force, and Trump said people wouldn't have minded an occupying force. And to be honest, you know, in middle America, that might be true at the moment, because, you know, we've seen those scenes of small business people getting battered. You know, all they're trying to do is stop looters. But of course, then we know, you know, perhaps without even knowing it, Trump had that tweet about the looting starts, the shooting starts, and inflaming things yet again, because that's got its origins with with racism decades ago. So where this ends, like, where does it end? I mean, they're calling these curfews, and everyone's disobeying the curfews. Are people going to be shot by the military? Is that where this ends up? That's where I fear it ends up.
Let's hope not. Look, as you mentioned, it seems to have this uncanny knack to evoke dark moments in history and then say that it was a complete coincidence. Look, the other thing, just to get a sort of insight into decision-making right now, he gave this address in the Rose Garden. He then walked across to the church, St John's Episcopal Church there in Washington. It's known as the President's Church. It was damaged by rioters, and he stood in front of it holding this Bible, talking about America being great. What's interesting is the backstory. A lot of agencies are reporting the only way that happened was via a very quick, pretty brutal clearing of the streets by authorities in Washington there, including some of the vision we were bringing you there of Channel 7 Australia, a reporter as well as a cameraman seeming to get basically assaulted by police on the way through because they just have to clear it as quickly as they can so the president can show that it's safe to walk across this church. I mean, it strikes me as an interesting priority, Andrew Clennell.
Well, it's a show of strength, isn't it? And yeah, the reports say tear gas and rubber bullets deployed so he could see the church. I mean, he's but again, some of those people would have been, I guess, people who've indulged in criminality, a small minority, but a lot of those people would have been peaceful protesters that he says he stands with. Well, he stands with them until he can get to church, I guess, and take that shot. But what he's trying to show there is I'm in control. I mean, that's the whole tactic, isn't it? I'm in control. These protesters aren't in control. And that's where the Democratic governors should be. And that's the pressure he's trying to impart here. So this is by no means the end of the story, you'd have to say. You would think that there will be more deployment by the governors of National Guard. You would think that the way things are going, that may prove not enough. And then in comes the military. And what are the rules of engagement there? I mean, are the military going to be in a position to arrest people? Are they going to have weapons? It's a scary 3 or 4 days ahead, really, because nothing any political leader seems to say stops these protests and stops the violence. You had that impassioned speech by the Atlanta mayor, I think on Saturday or Friday, and saying, go and register to vote. That's how you're going to make a difference. I think 40% of people vote in the United States. And, instead people are out who probably don't vote, are out in the streets.